That's good. Richard Rohr is a Franciscan priest and who, among other things, has a contemplative reflection every day that he posts. Comes into my email every day, and I generally get a chance to read it. But a couple days ago, the reflection was something that he found that presiding Bishop Michael Curry had written. I think it's pertinent to today's gospel reading, and he says, in part, "I've come to see that the call of God, the love that bids us welcome, is always a call to become the true you. Not an imitation of someone else, the true you. Someone made in the image of God, deserving of and receiving of love. There is a Jewish proverb," he goes on, "before every person there marches an angel proclaiming, 'Behold the image of God.'" Imagine that for a moment. In front of you, everywhere you go, every moment of your life, there is an angel marching ahead of you saying, "Behold the image of God." How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel as you realize that every other human being also has that angel marching in front of them? Behold the image of God. Unselfish, sacrificial living isn't about ignoring or denying or destroying yourself. Yourself. Loving the self is a required balance. If we fail in that, we fail our neighbor too. To love your neighbor is to relate to them as someone made in the image of God. And it is to relate to yourself as someone made in the image of God. It's God, up, down, all around, and God is love. The ability to love yourself is intimately related to your capacity to love others. The challenge is in creating a life that allows you to fulfill both needs. I often speak of the loving, liberating, and life-giving God. Sharing godly love liberates the true self so that we can more fully live and discover that place where your deep gladness and the world's great hunger come together to meet. End quote. Yesterday, Mary Fairbrook, Lisa Ozida, and I wrapped up Diocesan Convention for another year. Bishop Greg gives an address every year, and yesterday's was very powerful. First off, he wanted to let everybody know in the whole diocese, and probably the whole world, how grateful he is. How grateful he is for all of us and all we have done to navigate this last year and a half plus now. He said thank you several times. He is grateful how well we have adapted to what has been thrust upon us. And it doesn't quite want to end, so we're still in the middle of it. Then he went on to talk about the work we set for ourselves last year and how that has evolved for him, changed for him and to him, as bishop and personally as a human who is called to love his neighbor as himself. He was quite humble in a deep apology around his own racist behavior. Last year at convention, we overwhelmingly passed several resolutions that looked at racism and diversity in them. This year, our theme was about striving for justice and peace, which is one of our baptismal covenants. And it is all around striving for peace and justice in a world that is literally overwhelmed by racism. He shared a Jewish prayer that is often said during the holy season of Purim. I need to go look back at the YouTube video to find the whole thing, but the lines that struck me most were, "First, be reconciled to your brother or sister. Because before a person can be healed, he must acknowledge his illness. Before a person finds light, she must know her own darkness. And before a people is forgiven, they must confess their sins. I would say that ties in quite well with the need to love your neighbor as yourself, because healing happens when you love both equally. And doing both, or actually even either one of them, is hard work. What he shared yesterday was what we did last year was really good, but it probably was only the easy part. The harder work was not letting ourselves pat ourselves on the back and go back to life as normal, whatever normal is. And he used the example of hitting the snooze button on an alarm clock. Over and over throughout the history of this country, we have recognized the issue of racism. We emancipate slaves. We pass civil rights bills. We march in the streets for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And then we hit the snooze button and go back to sleep. The final resolution last year called for us to sign an anti-racism covenant, a promise that we make. But beyond that, we were asked to study it, pray with it, and live into it. As I was looking through the covenant then, I said to myself, this is just a piece of paper. And unless we are willing to follow our part of the covenant, it is useless and it won't change anything. During the discussion last year, my good friend and colleague Jo Beecher stood up and spoke. Well, actually, she didn't stand up. She got on Zoom. And she spoke to the convention and she said, I ask that you do not pass this resolution. Now, Jo has been in ethnic ministries for most of her life, and she was probably, I think, the founding vicar at La Iglesia de la Resurrección in Mount Vernon. For her to say that was pretty shocking for all of us, especially those of us who know her. And then she said, if you are not going to do the things that this covenant asks us, then you shouldn't vote for it. It passed by a huge, huge margin. And that means to me that we have agreed to a covenant, a promise, that is nearly as valid as the one we make at our baptisms, and next Sunday we will renew when we celebrate All Saints' Day. This covenant is not an easy thing to do, and there isn't a person who doesn't know that. Someone said that what we had done was like putting our big toe into Puget Sound and thinking we jumped into the Pacific Ocean. We have a long way to go, but it was a start if we were willing to begin where we are and work toward something good and right. And that was last year, and I came back and I was pretty full of vim and vigor for it. And then I hit the snooze button and I went back to sleep. Part of the problem with all of this is that the work of racial justice is exhausting. It's seemingly endless. And we are already utterly exhausted. After Bishop Gregg's talk, Mary and Lisa and I got on our own Zoom call to talk about his remarks and how to do this work. And he gave us 2 or 3 questions to deal with. We had 20 minutes to solve the world's problem around racism. We need days to discuss and years to work on this. As Bishop Curry says, the ability to love yourself is intimately related to your capacity to love others. The challenge is creating a life that allows you to fill both needs. Our work is around naming our illness, acknowledging the darkness, and seeking forgiveness. Our neighbor is our best friend, but it also is every other person who doesn't act or talk or look like me, because we are all made in the image of God. And we all, every moment of our lives, have that angel who walks in front of us and says, "Behold the image of God." If we are going to preach the gospel, then we can't cherry pick the words we like. We have to take all of them, listen to all of them, take in all of them, and learn to live with and in all of them. I don't know where this is going, and I'm tired. But it is time to quit hitting the snooze button. It is time to get up. I don't know what that means for me, and I don't know what it means for us. But I am ready to get up. And I hope you will also be ready to get up, because we need to do this work. We have a world that is falling apart and killing each other because we have not done this work. If before every person there marches an angel proclaiming, "Behold the image of God," then that person is my neighbor. And it is my calling to love them as I love myself. And as tired as I am, that is my pledge to you. I am going to get up, and we are going to deal with this. And you may not like this, because it is hard, hard work. But we will find, hopefully, a balance where we push ourselves a little harder here and then rest a little more here. Together, I hope you will join me, because I can't do this alone, and I don't want to do it alone. And we, as a people of God, if we are to follow that God, then we must remember that angel. And we must remember that in front of us, if there is that angel, behind us is the God who loves us beyond all imagining. Hold those two images this week, and then hold the ones that are parallel with you, to recognize your neighbor as yourself, to love your neighbor as you love yourselves. In Jesus' holy name I pray, help us to get up and wake up and do the work you have given us to do. Amen.